Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the More Than You See podcast. This is the first episode of season 4, and I am so excited that this season we are going to focus on having meaningful conversations with creatives about their mental health journeys. Please note, I am not a licensed practitioner or therapist, but an actor and a filmmaker who is deeply interested in sharing my own struggles and exploring the mental health of others. My hope is that these conversations bring you some joy, some personal understanding, and some tools so that you can build your own mental health toolbox. If you are new to this season, welcome. And if you are returning, welcome back. If you are new, I want to say that we have 3 seasons of past conversations with creatives, as well as some episodes that are just focused on specific mental illnesses and specific mental health topics. And so I strongly encourage you to go back and re-listen to some of those episodes. I also have to say, please like, subscribe, share this podcast if it resonates with you, because it might resonate with someone else, and it really does help spread the word of mouth. I really want to thank everyone for their ongoing support of this podcast, of this community. And let me just say that this season, I'm really going to be focusing on these creative conversations and on sharing a little bit more of myself, a little bit more about my struggles and my journey. And the reason for that is that I have realized through some self-reflection, through, working with my therapist and all the, mental health tools and mental health work that I do, that at times I was utilizing the research and the resources of others in order to not share my own experiences, because I felt sometimes like my experience and my voice wasn't valid. And I'm really trying to embrace this idea that all of our voices and all of our experiences are valid, including my own. I think, oftentimes it's harder to believe in ourselves more than anyone else. And so this season, I'm really trying to focus on the validity and the power of my experience and the experience of the community. So thank you, everyone, for continuing to show up. And I'm really excited for all of the incredible interviews that I am going to bring to you in this season. To start us off, one of my favorite people is an actor, a director, a filmmaker, a writer. Jessica Martin is incredible. I have worked with her. I've worked with her as a director. We actually have a short film that we made a few years ago that's a PSA about mental health. It came out on More Than You See 3 years ago, and I'm going to make sure that it is linked in the show notes as well as show up on our social media so you can go and rewatch that. Jessica is a very vocal mental health advocate as well as an accomplished actress. Now, we are currently in the middle of a strike. I am recording this on August 16th, and we have gotten permission to continue recording from SAG-AFTRA. But because of the strike, I am not, and my guests are not allowed to talk about specific projects who might be under the banner of these struck companies, these companies that we cannot support right now, we cannot market. This means that Jess and I cannot talk about anything specific. We cannot name any specific project that she has worked on in the past or that she would like to be talking about, because that would be promoting these films that we are currently on strike against. This means that I would strongly encourage you to go and check out her IMDb and her Instagram. Both of those links are in the show notes, and that way you can see what an incredibly accomplished actress that she is. I am so honored that she is here with us today. And without further ado, here's Jess. Hi, Jess. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. One of the things I really want to focus on this year is providing a safe space for people, creatives, to share how they're actually doing. So do you want to rewind? Is there anything you want to add as far as how you're doing today?
I'm feeling really anxious today. Anxiety disorder is on my menu of delightful things in my brain. So today's a more anxious day. I have to really start monitoring my coffee intake. Like that's part of my morning routine, like having a cup of coffee, but that does impact anxiety later in the day for me. So I'm like, oh, okay, might need to skip my cup tomorrow. And then just I'm in that phase as a creative where it's like, I'm not feeling productive enough, mainly because I'm so tired all of the time. And I think I'm getting to the point where I think the strike is impacting me a little bit. I've never been an actor who like makes their soul living from being an actor.
Right.
So the strike started. I'm like, well, what's the difference? But I think now I'm like, oh man, like fall TV season would be upon us, and it's not yet anyway. So I think it's kind of starting to like sink in for me of, living in Los Angeles, you're never sure of what opportunities will come your way. But it feels a lot like the pandemic where, we live in this land of potential, but then like the faucet's turned off.
The circumstances have changed.
Exactly. So like none of that potential is possible right now.
Right.
And I think I'm really starting to feel that. And I think I had the same experience during the pandemic where at first I was just like, oh, thank God I can just like take a break and just like stay in my house for a couple weeks because that's what we thought was going to, make a difference. And then you're like, oh, wow, okay, this is longer. This is impacting my career and creative life. So I think this is a really long answer to this question, but I have made a conscious effort to get my hobbies back out. And so I like to sew. And to me, it's really important that your hobbies are not side hustles. I never intend to sell anything that I sew. It's either for me or a friend, family member. And just doing something that is joyful. So I did some sewing this morning, which was really lovely.
Right. That long answer is good because
Okay.
I think that's why I wanted to instate this question this season is because I think that we're so used to just giving like one-off answers as far as like how we're doing.
Yeah, like you can't just say like I'm fine, I'm good, because we're not.
Right.
Like we're just straight up not.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And just for anyone who's listening who is not necessarily in the industry, there's obviously a WGA, which is the Writers Guild, and SAG-AFTRA, which is the Actors Guild strike right now. And so because of that, Jess, my lovely guest here, we will be discussing past projects, but without naming them because they are we cannot promote past work that is under these companies that we are currently striking against. So just to give everyone a little bit of an FYI, and it really has put I feel like it's a very interesting time right now because, you're also a creative beyond an actor. You're a writer and a creator and a director, and I want to talk about all those things. And I know that for myself, and I would love to know if this resonates with you, that I've felt like, okay, so this is an opportunity for me to now create my own things because this is like, we kind of have to. And then now I'm having anxiety around, well, what if the strike ends in a week and I didn't get enough done?
Yeah.
In this like paused time that I put upon myself. And all of this is just the anxiety that I've put upon myself in order to accomplish these, goals that are oftentimes completely unhelpful. So, I think that one thing that I have instated for myself in the last few weeks is that I just try to do 3 things every day. I try to do one thing for my body, one thing for my soul, and one thing for my career. And that's it. And of course, I do many other things beyond that. But I've really tried to, and for me, going like for my body could be going and striking and, being out with my comrades and the community and moving my body in that way. And then for me as well, I've also been trying to paint more. And so like focus on something that is creative, that is outside of what I am doing in order to further myself. I think that that's been helpful for me, that it's like, okay, if I accomplish those three things, then at least I've been successful for myself today. But it's tough.
Absolutely. This week, sometimes you kind of just have to be like tough with yourself. Like, okay, you're really unhappy, you're really frustrated. You got to do something. Like, I'm tired of hearing this narrative in your head. And so this week I started setting a timer for 20 minutes. I have to move my body. That can be stretching. That can be, I have a little trampoline. I like to bounce.
Mm-hmm.
But just like moving my body. And then 20 minutes, I'm going to practice like the piano. I'm going to do something like that for 20 minutes. I'm going to sew. And just creating that container, because I struggle with like, okay, well, I should maybe like do something. I should like work out today. It's like, okay, just for 20 minutes.
Right.
All you have to do, 20 minutes, like the timer is the boss, and it's like some accountability. And then after 20 minutes, you're like, great, I did it. I don't have to think about it again today. And just like taking it off that like mental docket is so helpful to me. I'm like a compulsive list maker. And so like, boom, I crossed off my 20-minute activity, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful to me. So like when I'm feeling unproductive, having that list of like, well, 20 minutes, I did that, and that, every day, that's 1 hour. 1 hour that I would have been doom scrolling or like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like I did things that either benefit my mind, soul, or body. I need to start putting writing back on there. I need to get back on the writing train. Haven't yet. I'll get there.
Yeah.
But it's part of my process.
Yeah. You will in due time. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that like we get to a point where like, okay, now I'm ready to actually jump into this. But
yeah.
we need to like give ourselves grace that like it'll happen when it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, I want to go back a little bit. Number one, I want to talk about the fact that you have always tied your mental health and your creative careers very closely. You directed and wrote a short that I helped produce and star in, that's about inner demon. It was actually, we premiered it. That was like something that we were going to do during the pandemic, or have it released during the pandemic during film festivals, and then pandemic hit. And so we released it through More Than You See, which was wonderful. That was like, 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
Which was crazy, 3.5 years ago. And so I'm curious if you ever, going back to like baby Jess doing creative stuff, did you ever have a point where you felt scared of sharing that side of yourself through your creative works?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I didn't understand what was happening in my brain, and that it wasn't like, we'd say neurotypical these days. I didn't understand that until I was like a teen, and I really didn't understand it until like my 20s. And my 20s was when I started going to therapy for the first time, and like kind of learning a manual for my own brain. And so I think first I had to have that kind of self-awareness, and I had to know like specifically what's happening inside myself. And then it was, I want to say it was like my mid 20s, just knowing that I, had a variety of mental health issues. Like that was just normal to me by that point. Like it wasn't shocking. It wasn't surprising. It was just like, this is how I live my life. Back then, that was when blogs were a thing. And I worked with a photographer friend of mine, Dondra Budd. And we collaborated on this like photo shoot series representing like depression. Mm-hmm. And Dondra and I did like a bunch of different shoots together. This just happened to be one of them. And so I did a blog post where I released these photos on my website and talked about my mental health journey. And like my blog was not a big deal. Okay. Like maybe 10 people would read it a week.
Mm-hmm.
But that post, hundreds of people read it, so many comments, a lot of private messages of like, thank you so much for sharing this. I thought I was alone. And so in a way, it felt like coming out with a mental illness. And it was kind of like after that blog post, and I saw the impact that it had. I think art is most powerful when the artist like, really puts themselves into it. And so it's like, okay, well, this is who I am. So, how can I incorporate this into my art in an authentic way? I never want to be like, I don't know, like saccharine, or I want it to be like real, because this is a real thing that 1 in 5 Americans deal with each year. And while it might not be like the focus of every project that I make, like there might be an aspect to it. And then we were able to make that PSA, which was great. Like that was the focus of it. And then it's kind of culminated in this solo show that I have written that it took me, like 10 years to write. I'm a very slow writer. I'm a very slow writer where I really talk about the nitty-gritty of my experience with mental health and mental illness. And I did my first public reading of it a couple months ago, which you came to. Thank you so much. And the same thing happened where like people messaged me afterwards being like, I didn't know this about you. Thank you so much for sharing this, because, I thought I was the weird one, or I thought, or, and that kind of thing. And that's kind of my goal with sharing my journey of this does not own me. This is just a part of me. And I think a lot of people are not there yet in their journey. And it's like, how can we help more people get there? How can we help more people not be afraid or ashamed or anything like that? And so anytime that I do incorporate the theme of mental health, mental illness in any of my work, it's kind of with that intention.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that show, which was fantastic. And it definitely was something where, I do know you. I didn't know the details about your experience. It was very interesting for me being in the audience, experiencing other people around me experience you. Because it was also very telling to me, people who had confronted depression and suicide before, and people who maybe necessarily hadn't, or that they don't have the same relationship that I do and that you do with those subjects. And you go, it's brilliant, like, by the way. And I think that like the way that you frame your life and Joan of Arc's life, and the way that you intertwine everything, and your story that you have when you're standing on the roof and you have suicidal ideations, like that whole piece of the show was, I felt like you were opening me up and like reading everything inside of me. Like it was, I mean, it's making me cheer. It spoke to me so deeply. And I'm sitting in the audience, just not, it wasn't that I was trying to hold it together, but I was like trying to not influence other people's experiences of the show, by like me being overly. But it was, it spoke to me so deeply. And it was so moving to have you share yourself like that. And it is so important. And I think that as creatives, one of the things that I'm really trying to focus on this season is this idea that our voices matter just as they are. I think that, in the past with this podcast, I really tried to give people resources and tools so that they can, just have, as you have a manual for your brain, help other people create their own manuals. And while I think that there's a lot of importance in that, I also think that I was using that as a way to hide and not share myself, because I was like, I'm just going to share other people's resources and tools, and like other people can learn from that. And like, but I don't really need to share myself. I mean,
but that is important. Like, I don't give yourself credit. Like, that's really important. And more people know about those resources because you shared them.
Well, thank you. And I will continue to do that for sure. But I think like the second piece of it is this idea that like our voice matters, especially as creatives, especially as someone who has the courage to, share of themselves. So thank you for that. And I'm curious, like, as you were writing this one woman show, was there any pieces of it that it took you 10 years to write? Was there any pieces that you were wavering as far as what you wanted to share? Like, was, your journey with suicide always going to be a part of it? Or did that, go in and out as far as like your comfortability sharing that?
Oh, yeah. Like, I didn't want to share most of that. Like, it started by, I just wanted to do a show about Joan of Arc. Like, that's it. But I had written this version of a show, just like Joan of Arc. It incorporated like interpretive dance. And for very obvious reasons that didn't ever happen. But the more I talked about wanting to write this show, I actually did a solo show workshop with Lauren Weedman when I first moved to LA. And, we all had like our ideas of shows. We're sharing them. And I'm sharing my idea, like, I want to write this show about Joan of Arc. And she's like, that's cool. Joan of Arc's really cool. But why do you want to write a show? What is your connection with Joan of Arc? I'm like, well, that's not interesting. I'm not interesting. I don't care. And I struggled with that for a while. And then I started kind of writing the show, combining my story and her story. And it got to a place I thought it was done. And I sent it to a friend of mine and she said, this is nice, but you're hiding, essentially. And so then I signed up to do this reading because I needed a deadline. I was like, I'm never going to finish this show unless I have, like a deadline, like a reason to.
Right.
And that's when I really like sat down and went to work. So the section that has to do with suicide and suicidal ideation, that was kind of always in there. I always wanted to be able to take it out because that is a really scary thing to share. So I do want to say to all of those creatives listening out there, don't share anything that you're not ready to, because this is not drama therapy for me. And I made a deal with myself that I would never work on writing the show if I was in a depressive state. I was only going to write this show when I was well. And all of the things I share in the show, I have processed with professional help. And I have also notified my nearest and dearest that, hey, this is content that I'm sharing.
Right.
It may be upsetting to you, but I'm open to talking about it. So like there is a difference between your creative work and drama therapy.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important to distinguish those two things. So me sharing this information to the world is not like a release for me. This was just like, hey, this is just part of the story. And I don't want to give spoilers, but the moment in my research that I learned something specific about Joan of Arc, I was like, oh shit, I have to. And in a way, I feel like she was making me. And it's like, if you're going to pour this tea about Joan, like you better do it on yourself, right? And so it just like, it became inevitable. What is in the show, I feel like, and I have people say like, oh, well, you might need to cut more. And I'm like, no, I can't. Like everything has to be there now. So letting Joan's story speak to me, letting my own story speak to me, and being like, what needs to be there? What doesn't? What are you afraid of? What does it mean to share it or not? And there are some things that I don't have in the show. And I never will, because they don't need to be. But the things that are in the show, I felt it was important to share.
That's so healthy and valuable, because I think that, as actors in particular, there's this idea of like just getting into a character, method acting, or even just like absorbing yourself into a character so much that character overwhelms you, like you're who you are. And I know that, that's a whole other conversation, but I know that I've certainly had, I shot something once that was like right after my ex-husband and I split. And it was that was drama therapy, not necessarily a good thing, but it was because we literally shot 3 days after he left. And it was like one of those things where it was like, I can't get through this without going through and taking this baggage with me. And thankfully, the project was well suited for that. So it worked. But the question in there is that, like, do you think that your acting and your creative side has gotten better as you've been able to kind of separate yourself in a healthy way so that you can, really focus on the character and their struggles and kind of leave your own mental health out of it and not intertwine the two so much?
100%, like 200%.
Yeah.
I think the reason I gravitated toward acting as a young person was because I didn't have to be myself, because I didn't like being myself. And I wanted to be other people. It, was exciting. It was new. And, it is like really fun to play different characters who are unlike yourself. You get to be like different professions and learn different things. Like that's so much fun. But I think for a lot of young people who start a drama program, a lot of it is like, I finally have a place to exercise my emotions in a way that is acceptable, or I can run from myself, or I can, it may not be like the healthiest reasons that people get into this profession. And I think there are a lot of unhealthy habits and techniques like method acting that exacerbate mental health and mental illness issues. And I think when I was finally able to understand, like, just kind of like deal with my own shit and not, I mean, it informs my acting. It's like, oh, I understand this character in a different way because of my experiences, that kind of thing. You bring all of yourself to it, but not like, because I've done those roles where I've like given everything to the character. They've kind of taken over in a way that gave like a really great performance, but was not great for my personal well-being. And so it's like, oh, okay, I have done that. I have understood that experience and my process, and let's take that information and evolve past it. Yeah. And, I think now when I approach a character, I am very cognizant of the content of things I sign on for. And I understand like, okay, so this is a pretty intense scene I might have here. How do I need to prepare ahead of time to take care of myself for any emotional fallout? Like, are there any triggers in this content for me? Like, how do I care for myself so I'm not just like a mess on set, or I'm like, in my bed for a month afterward because of what this project has done to my psyche. And so I think having that awareness, like I can show up and just kind of separate everything and focus on the character and being open and vulnerable in the context of the character and not myself. I mean, obviously that is the goal of being an actor is being open with yourself. And which is why I think therapy is really important, of like, okay, how can I be open and not be a complete mess?
Yeah. So we might come back to the play, but I want to jump into your television film stuff here for a second. So, one of the projects that we can't talk about is something that is out right now, and it's a really exciting opportunity for you. I want to rewind a little bit because I know that when you booked this role, you were actually planning on leaving LA. And I'm wondering, how this is something that I'm going to be talking to a couple people about this season about, transitioning our goals when it comes to life and just like accepting where we are in life and the circumstances that we have and trying to find our happiness and our, creativity and our voice in the circumstances that we have. So I'm wondering if you can speak to what that decision was. And thankfully you are still in LA. You have not left, and I'm very glad about that. But like, how did your decision making, how did your mental health play into that? Because I'm sure that, LA is a very difficult city to live in. It's a very difficult city as a creative and as an actor, and for us to have these dreams and for them, to be a struggle all the time. And so I'm wondering where you were mentally when you were making that decision, and then booking that role and then shooting that role and all of that kind of stuff. And then just that whole journey from a mental health perspective.
Yeah. I'm like trying to figure out where to start to answer that question. When I got to LA, and it has always existed, but I feel like it was just at a fever pitch. Like, you need to take all of these classes, you need to do these workshops, you need to, like, there was so much you were expected to do as an actor, and like so many resources you need to put into it. And I did it all because I was like, I'm going to do this right. I'm going to do all the things they say. And so you can't say, like, I remember going to a party once and like, I just wasn't booking anything. I wasn't getting into rooms. And I was talking to this other actor and she's like, oh, well, like, have you done workshops? I'm like, yeah, I've done so many. It's embarrassing to say. And she's like, oh, okay. Have you, taken the XYZ classes? I'm like, yep, took them all. Oh, okay. Have you made any of your own work? Like, maybe make your own work. I'm like, yep, I've made shorts and a web series. And at the end of it, she's just like, okay, best of luck to you.
Had those conversations too.
Right?
Those conversations with like casting directors or whomever who I've like hired to be like, tell me what I can do.
Yeah.
What I'm doing wrong. And they've said like the exact same, go through the check marks.
Yeah.
And oh, you're an exemplary student.
Right.
Keep going. And it's like,
it's not a meritocracy here.
Right.
So yeah, I was doing everything to like marginal results. And 2019, I had a good year, and then the pandemic happened, and like all of that momentum just like went down the toilet. It just got to a point where it's like, this, number one, this isn't fun anymore. Number two, I feel like I have done everything I possibly could have. And sometimes it's just not in the cards for you. I can still be an actor in another city. It can just be different. It can just look different. And also, like, I see how this is impacting my partner as well. And all of these things together, I was just like, you know what? Maybe it's time to get out of here.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that for a long time because, you think like, oh, am I quitting? Am I failing? And, I struggle with that a lot. And I was like, you know what? No, I didn't fail. I did the best with what I had. And there are other things I can do with my one life. And I value myself more than I value whatever this is. And I think I had to get to that point and value my relationship that I'm like, you know what? I'm good. And then, of course, like literally boxes packed, I get this job. And everything happened like really quickly. Like the decision to stay happened very quickly. We've been here since that time, knowing like we can always, this choice is, we've made it once. It's always available to us again. And we may very well exercise that choice. I think because I had that, I was able to get to that place where like I am looking at career options in a different field because it's one I care very deeply about. And I think you can be more than one thing at the same time. And, you get to work as an actor as much as you want to. I mean, obviously, as much like you don't get to choose the amount of opportunities. Otherwise, I would have been working all the time, right? But like, if I choose to start doing something else and I start getting all these jobs coming in, but they're not ones I care about, but I care about this other thing, like, thanks, but no thanks. I'll wait for the right project to come around, but I need to focus on this other work because this is what is lighting my fire right now. And I think like I am just so excited about this strike because actors are really stepping into their power. And we have been treated like shit for so long. And, the fact that what we're asking for from the studios has audition guidelines.
Right.
Like, I don't think people understand how much time and money we put into auditions. And they just assume, it's gotten to the point. I love that we can audition from home. I don't necessarily want to go back in the room because I used to have to take off work all the time to go into rooms, and I lost money. Auditions cost me money. And now when we can record at home, I can do it after work or before work or whenever. You can see the setup behind me where we record our auditions. But the fact that they send you 14 pages on a Wednesday afternoon and they're like, we need this by tomorrow morning. And they expect you to be off book. They expect you to like have your hair and makeup done. They expect like a professional reader. Thank goodness I'm married to one. But like if I wasn't, that's a problem. And it's just like, it's totally unreasonable. And they're like, oh yeah, and actually you would start on Friday.
Right.
Oh, okay. It's just like, we're humans who have to make a living and start treating us like that. And I'm really excited about this labor movement across the country that people are starting to realize this or realize like, hey, this is actually not what I want to do anymore. And that's totally fine. That's, I think millennials, like we're getting to the age of we've done something for 10 to 20 years. We've like felt it out. And we're like, oh, actually, when I made this decision when I was 18 years old to pursue this particular field, maybe I didn't have all the info I needed. Maybe now that I'm an adult with like different priorities or different interests, like I'm going to do this other thing now. And I love a career pivot, like go live your best life. So again, that's a very long answer to this question. But I think it's just, again, having that self-awareness, like doing the internal work, processing like big feelings and knowing like, yeah, I am more than this. This is the thing I love. I've trained my whole life to do. I always want to do it. But there's also other opportunities that are cool too.
Well, I think that like in this culture, in this city and in this industry, but also just in America in general, I think we really have an issue with balance and with, not prioritizing, not just our mental health from a clinical standpoint, but our mental health when it comes to just our spirituality and how we show up in the world and how we take care of ourselves and our community. And I think that like we mock in jest other countries that like have, their like afternoon naps or, like whatever they're doing in order to actually take care of their society. And we send memes around about it as far as, but we all know that it's coming from a place of like, well, shit. Like, yeah. If this country is not falling apart and they are still handling everything and they're taking naps in the middle of the afternoon, like, what is wrong with us? And I think we do have this issue with, prioritizing. I have 2 tattoos, and one of my tattoos is a Harry Potter quote. And it's, don't dwell on dreams and forget to live. And that for me is like, I have to remind myself of that all the time of like, whatever, goals that I have, the present moment and the people I'm spending time with and like what I'm currently doing with my time is just as important, if not more important, because who knows what the future holds. And I think that it's so admirable for you and, your partner to kind of look at everything and just be like, okay, what is the decision that we're making for ourselves right now that is going to serve us and our relationship and our mental health and our, because I think that so many people are afraid to have that conversation. And you're right. Like you can always change your mind. You can always make that decision again.
I want to hop on that because I think you bring up such great points. And like, trust me, I looked into moving to those countries. Like I would love to, but immigration is a little difficult in those places because everyone wants to go there. Because you're right. Like they prioritize the wellness of their people. And that is not something that happens in this country. And I think it'd be remiss to not mention like the DEI work that is really important into like removing ourselves from like white settler colonialism, puritanical like mindset of like if you're not working all the time, you're bad, like morally. And I think that just gets like, has been so ingrained in our culture. And it's like, ooh, okay, like how do I divest from this mentality? So I think that's a, important thing to mention. Like your quote that you have, like, don't dwell on drink. I love that one. And one thing that I have to repeat to myself is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. Because I've had a lot of jobs that are not glamorous, but that's what I've had to do to pay the bills. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do it really well. And I'm going to do it as well as I would as showing up on a big TV set. And, for people who are like, oh, well, I have to achieve XYZ project. And I understand I'm speaking from like a privileged position, having done, film and television. But there's also long stretches where I don't do that work, not by choice. And so in that time, it's like, well, I still want to do this creative work that I love and have studied for all these years. And so, I'm part of a theater company that we like put on this festival so people can do their best work, and showing up with that same intention and that same professionalism across, these creative outlets. It's no different than like going to set, and the quality, the value of it creatively is the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's such a good, I think about that one too, but I should remind myself of that more, because it's even our downtime that we need to like put conscious like thought and appreciation for that downtime and the work time. Like no matter what we're doing, just being present and giving value to it is so important.
Yeah. And I think being able to do that helps you, divest from that toxic narrative.
Definitely.
Of like, I'm not doing enough. I say this, but that is constantly in my head. Right. I'm not doing enough. And I think it's mainly because like there's so many cool things to do in this life. And I just want to do more. I'm just so excited about life. And so I think that's where I'm coming from. I've gotten to a place where like that is where I'm coming from about like my desire to like do more, rather than like I have failed society if I haven't achieved XYZ, So yeah, that's where my neurosis comes from now. Yeah. Maybe a better place, but still there.
I get it. So, okay. So jumping ahead to this project coming out, and then the strike happens and you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because it mirrors like when you were filming this and stuff, you were also, had an NDA. So you also couldn't talk about this project while you were filming it. So it wasn't even something that you could be like, hey guys, I'm so excited. I'm filming this. And this is, so like you couldn't even, get into the excitement of it then. And then now for the project to be struck so you can't talk about it, that must be so insanely hard. And I want to acknowledge that first and foremost, because like, it just really, really sucks. In the intro, I talked about who you are and all of the amazing, work, and everyone can go and find out more about you on your IMDb or on Instagram. And so if you go to her Instagram, you can determine what the project is. But how are you feeling just with all of that happening?
I was supposed to get married in the summer of 2020. And obviously we couldn't. And so, we eventually got married in 2021 in just like a very, very small ceremony, but different than the one we had planned with like everybody there, like the big wedding thing. And it just kind of feels like that again, where you're not in control of most anything. There's a part of the Bhagavad Gita where I'm gonna paraphrase it probably really poorly, but essentially it says you are not owed the fruits of your labor. You are just owed your labor. Mm-hmm. And essentially being like you do the work, and what comes from it is not up to you. It is not for you. I had to remind myself of it while I was filming, while I was waiting for the release of it. It's like, okay, well, I did my good work and the rest is not for me. It is not up to me. And then when the strike happened concurrently with the release of this project, it was just like, okay, I have done my good work. The fruits of my labor are not for me. And it is a practice.
Mhm.
I joined the first picket line that I could. And it's just like, well, this is more important.
Yep.
This is right. What is happening right now is the right thing to be happening right now. Like in my heart, I'm like, yeah, of course this is right. Like we need to continue this fight for what is right in our industry and all of this. And people can still enjoy my work. And whatever fruits of my labor will come to me in their own time. But again, that's a practice, right? That is like a mental practice to do. And, like yoga has been a big part of my life for a long time. And I think the yamas and the niyamas are like maybe the most important practice of yoga. As, we think of yoga, we think asana practice, the physical practice. But the yamas and niyamas are like the ethical codes. And there's one called aparigraha, and it's essentially non-grasping. Like, are you trying to reach for something? Are you trying to grasp it? Are you trying to like pull it towards yourself? And so like once I really started studying them, like where am I like grasping and reaching in a way that is not for me? Mm. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to grasp for this because it is not for me. So highly recommend all y'all creatives out there to read your yamas and niyamas. And there's great YouTube videos on them. I got my certification as a yoga instructor. And during my certification, I injured myself during practice to the point where I've only now 2 years later been able to start doing yoga again. Wow. So it's just like, well, I've had practice in these things that I thought were going to happen a certain way, and then they didn't.
Right.
And it's just like, okay, well, clearly I haven't learned this lesson yet.
Yep. There's another one.
I will continue receiving it until I do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have 2 final questions for you. The first one, I'm going to go back to your play, to your one-woman show. And in that, you really talk about how one of your, and I'm going to paraphrase incorrectly, I'm sure. So please correct me. Your, like one of your missions in life is like to be a mental health warrior and to like, spread that understanding and that awareness. And I'm wondering, what that means for you and how, if you have any future goals or how you are going to continue to, show up for yourself and for others and live that life.
Yeah. I think, again, it's in everything you do. In any place I am, how can I make it more accessible and accepting of people who may be neurodivergent, who may just be having a bad day? How can I extend grace towards people, which I don't know that I'm a particularly patient person, but like you have to practice that. So I think it's like an everyday kind of practice. Also, I hope to put this show up. Like my big goal is to take this show on tour and do some fringe festivals and do it in cities that I love and like, spread the message with my show. I thought about becoming a therapist, and I talk about it in the show a little bit, like, because I got a degree in psychology. And when I was really like, I was ready to move, I was looking into grad schools for becoming a therapist. But the more I looked into it, the more I was like, don't get me wrong, I love my therapists. They help me out. But I just started thinking of like structurally. The reason people are struggling is because of the structure of our society and our world.
Yeah.
And how can we fix things upstream? And so now I'm looking into policy. Now I'm looking into the sustainability of our planet, because climate change is going to impact the mental health. It already is, of every single person here, and it's going to get worse. And how can we prevent suffering? And so just keeping all of that in mind as I move forward with, other things I want to pursue, the art that I want to create. Like, how do I create a safe space? Number one, just wherever I go, how do I create a safe space? And number two, how do I quite literally share this message? And then number three, how do I alleviate suffering in a structural way? And just starting to look bigger, 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 bigger. And I don't have any hard and fast goals of I will have spread my message when this happens. I know that as long as human beings are around, they're going to suffer from mental health issues. And that's okay. And that's part of us being human beings. But how do we give people the tools to help with that? How do we give people the safety and the courage to face that part of themselves? So I think it's just kind of an everyday everything, just internalized message, kind of feeling like a Care Bear, just glow that tummy and spread that message across everything.
Final question for you is, and I think you already addressed it a little bit, but what are some of the tools and resources that you use for your little brain manual that might be helpful to someone listening?
Yeah. I mention it in my show, but I understand how very privileged I have been in my life to have been able to go to therapy, over a long amount of time.
Yeah.
In my 20s, when I was in the crux of my mental health crisis, I went to a therapist for, it was 2 to 3 years, once a week, because I needed it.
Yeah.
And that probably saved my life. She helped me kind of write that manual for my brain so that I can just, I still have a therapist, and I go to my therapist when I really need it. And it'll be okay, oh great, I got the help I needed, but now I can manage it on my own. I have been medicated at different points in my life. And once I was feeling better, I didn't need to do that anymore. But I know that's available to me. And again, that self-awareness. What are my triggers? What situations should I avoid? What's going to make me feel worse? And doing your best in this capitalist society to take care of yourself. It's very hard. So those are my big ones. And, just literally taking a mental health day, treating my mental health like my physical health. If I have a cold, I'm going to stay in bed. I do the same thing if my mental health is really bad and I'm not functional. Because I'm functional most of the time with my mental illness, but sometimes I'm not functional. And on those days, great, I'm going to be in bed with my tea, watching my shows. And usually just giving yourself space, at least for me, I'm oh, great. Okay. I feel better now. I can face the world tomorrow. So I think having that, giving yourself permission, and most jobs, they're not going to ask why you're sick, unless they ask for a doctor's note, but you can also get a doctor's note for a mental health day. And also it's none of their business, and it's illegal for them to do anything, change their behavior towards you because you have a mental health issue. But when you start treating your mental health with the same love and care and priority as your physical health, I think that was a big change for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Awareness and advocacy is
yeah, advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's okay to say no. It's okay to walk away. Go take care of yourself. Come back. Acting or whatever your creative career, it'll be there. There's a reason acting is the second oldest profession. Always going to be there. It's going to be there in the future. It's going to look different, sure. But you still get to do the thing you love. You still get to write. You still get to like whatever it is. It just might look different.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jess. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I love all the stuff you're doing. I know I've told you before, but like doing the podcast, sharing resources, like, you know, it's good to have people shining the light out there. And I just want to acknowledge you for that.
Well, thank you. Ditto. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the More Than You See podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jess as much as I did. I know that it was really valuable for me to listen to her talk about her experiences, finding her voice when it comes to mental health, her experience having a huge project that she is not allowed to talk about, and how she has built some tools in order to cope with that disappointment and still maintain her mental health and her sanity through this period. I would also like to, applaud Jess for coming and showing up today and for sharing her story with our community. I know that it can be tough to sometimes share so much of ourselves. And Jess, you shared so much with all of us, and I really, really appreciate it. Please remember to be kind to yourself this week. Remember that you and everyone around you is more than you see. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you again next week.